He left me a pocket watch and a note that said, "This is your final test." I hadn't spoken to my grandfather in over 10 years. And yet, on the morning of his funeral, I was the one holding the key to his study, and the only item waiting for me inside was a heavy, antique pocket watch and a handwritten note that read, "This is your final test. Prove you're worthy of the name you carry." That was it. No explanation. No context. Just a challenge from the man who raised me, then cast me out. Everyone else in the family got something. My brother Jason got the deed to the summer house. My cousin Valerie received a trust fund she never earned. Even my uncle, who once embezzled from the family business, got a car. A vintage Jaguar, restored to mint condition. Me? I got a ticking clock and a riddle. But that was just like him. My name is Michael Whitaker, 34 years old, and until I was 22, I thought I was the heir to something bigger. Legacy, honor, maybe even redemption. Instead, I was erased. After one fight, one damn argument, one night that changed everything. And yet here I was, standing in that cold, dark study, the smell of pipe smoke still clinging to the wood panels, holding his last words in my hands. It wasn't about the watch. It was about what he never said, the secrets he buried, the truths he left me to dig up. And if you're wondering whether I walked away, whether I threw that note in the fire and let the past stay dead, no, I didn't. Because when a man like Richard Whitaker dies, he doesn't leave a will. He leaves a puzzle. And I was tired of running from it. The pocket watch wasn't working. It ticked, but the hands never moved. I took it to a horologist that same afternoon, a little shop off the edge of downtown, where I remembered him taking me as a kid. The man behind the counter recognized the model instantly. That's AUS, Navy Master Navigation Timepiece. Rare. Very rare. From the 50s. And this one, wait a minute. Is that engraved inside? I opened the back. Inside was a series of numbers. 41, 3947 N/81, 6937 W. Coordinates, he muttered. Those point somewhere. You better check a map. I did. Cleveland. The old harbor district. The place where my grandfather served during his naval days. Where he met my grandmother. Where he supposedly saved a man's life in a fire that no one ever confirmed happened. I knew the stories. But I also knew the man, half myth, half ghost. And now I was following his trail like some second-rate detective. But something told me I had to. That this wasn't just a scavenger hunt. It was a confession. Or maybe an apology. I told no one. Not Jason, not my mother, not even my fiancée, Claire. I just packed a bag, left a note, and drove 8 hours to a city I hadn't set foot in since I was 12. The coordinates led me to a warehouse, abandoned, rusted over, chained at the front. But tucked into the crack of the main door was a slip of paper. Old, weathered, folded perfectly. I opened it. Inside was a photo. Me, 6 years old, sitting on my grandfather's lap. He was smiling in a way I'd forgotten. Soft, human. On the back of the photo was a single word, begin. And just like that, I knew. I wasn't just looking for answers. I was chasing the truth. And the truth I was about to learn had claws. That night in the motel, I didn't sleep. I spiraled. The word begin from the photo rattled in my skull like a ghost that wouldn't stop whispering. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that warehouse door, that chain, that carved hard in the brick. It wasn't just a memory, it was a message. One he left knowing only I would see it. By dawn, I was back in my car, driving through the haze of a city that hadn't forgiven me, and maybe never would. I returned to the dock, the spot under it where I'd found the tin with the note and coordinates. But this time, I brought a flashlight, just to be sure I didn't miss anything. There was nothing new, but standing there, I could feel it. The place had weight, like a theater after a tragedy, where the air still remembers the last performance. The new coordinates had taken me across the river to an old part of town, near the industrial tracks. Not a neighborhood, exactly. More like a graveyard of steel and silence. The destination? A forgotten bookstore. Second chances. Even the name felt like a test. Inside, it smelled like mildew and lost time. Rows of paperbacks with cracked spines leaned like tired soldiers. But the man behind the counter, he was sharp. He didn't look surprised to see me. "Michael Whitaker," he said. That froze me. He handed me a leather-bound journal without a word. And there it was. My grandfather's handwriting on the second page. Every man lives two lives. The second begins when he finds out why. The rest of the journal? Empty, except for a pocket in the back cover. Inside it, another photograph. Black and white. Grainy. A man on a dock, holding a baby. My mother said I was born in the summer. This must have been then. And scrawled in faded ink beneath the photo. Find the house with no numbers. That was it. Another cryptic instruction. Another breadcrumb. I looked up. Where is this supposed to lead? The old man just said, to whatever you buried. That's what he said. Whatever you buried will dig itself up if you let it. He didn't give me a receipt. Didn't ask for payment. Just turned and disappeared through a curtain behind the counter. I stepped back into the sun and felt like I was walking through someone else's life. But it was mine. All of it. And I had a sinking feeling that whatever I found next would change the way I remembered everything. I drove around for hours looking for it, the house with no numbers. At first, it felt ridiculous. Every block had numbered mailboxes, numbered doors, even spray-painted addresses on the curbs. I was chasing a ghost. But then, just as the sun began to dip behind the trees, I saw it. A faded colonial on a street that barely had a name. No number on the door. No mailbox. No markings at all. It was like it didn't exist, at least, not to the city. I parked across the street and sat there, engine running. Something about it felt wrong. Not dangerous, just sacred. Like I wasn't supposed to be there unless I knew why I had come. I turned off the ignition. The silence hit hard. The gate creaked when I pushed it open. The path to the porch was uneven, lined with weeds that looked untouched for years. I knocked. No answer. Then I tried the knob. It was unlocked. The air inside was stale, heavy. A mixture of dust, dried herbs, and something metallic. The furniture was covered in white sheets. The kind you see in movies when the owner's been gone too long to remember. But there was one thing out of place. An old record player, still plugged in, a jazz record spinning slowly even though the needle wasn't touching it. I moved closer. There was something taped beneath the turntable lid. Another envelope. Same handwriting. Inside, a single sheet of paper. Forgiveness is the final inheritance. Beneath it, an address. Back in my car, I typed it into my phone. It was across the state line. A 2-hour drive into Pennsylvania. I hesitated, because I finally realized what this was. He wasn't just sending me to old places. He was sending me to people. People I hadn't seen in over a decade. People I left behind when I walked away from this family. That address in Pennsylvania? I recognized it. It was the last known place my father lived before he disappeared. And my grandfather knew. He'd known all along. I gripped the steering wheel, jaw tight. My father had vanished after a scandal that nearly destroyed us all, and I had spent years blaming him for it. But now I had to face him. If he was still alive. I drove through the night. No music. No podcasts. Just the sound of tires on asphalt and the dull thump of my own heartbeat. That address in Pennsylvania wasn't just a destination. It was a wound I'd sealed shut and promised never to touch again. My father disappeared when I was 22, the same year my grandfather exiled me. The family said he fled to avoid legal trouble after some shady dealings with the trust. Embezzlement, maybe. Or worse. I never knew the full story. What I knew was this. One day he was there, and the next he wasn't. No goodbye. No explanation. Just silence. And now I was driving straight into that silence, hoping it would finally speak. I arrived around 3 a.m. The house was tucked into the side of a wooded road, half swallowed by trees, porch light off, but a dim glow coming from one back window. It wasn't much. A one-story ranch with peeling paint and a sagging roofline. But it was lived in. I sat there in the car for a long time, engine off, hands cold. Then I got out. The front steps creaked under my weight. I raised my hand to knock, but paused. What if he answered? Worse, what if he didn't? I knocked twice. No answer. I knocked again, harder this time. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Slow. Hesitant. The door creaked open 2 inches. A chain lock held it in place. A voice came from behind it. Raspy. Tired. Who is it? My voice caught in my throat. It's Michael, I said. Michael Whitaker. A long silence. Then the door slammed shut. For a moment I stood there, heart sinking, ready to turn and walk away. But I heard the chain slide. The door opened. He looked older. Thinner. A face half sunk into itself, with eyes that carried too many ghosts. He stared at me like I was a hallucination. Jesus Christ, he whispered. You look just like him. He stepped aside. I walked in. The place was a mess. Newspapers stacked on chairs. Ashtrays overflowing. Bottles lined the counter. But it was real. Human. He sat in the kitchen. I stayed standing. I didn't expect this, he said finally. I pulled the latest note from my pocket and slid it onto the table. He didn't touch it. Of course he'd do something like that, he muttered. That old bastard. Even in death, he's still pulling strings. He said forgiveness is the final inheritance. I replied quietly. My father let out a sound, part laugh, part sigh. He's not wrong, he said. But he's a damn hypocrite. Never forgave me for what happened. What did happen? I asked. His eyes flicked up. And that's when I saw it. Shame. Raw and unfiltered. You ready for the truth? He asked. I nodded. And he told me. He poured himself a drink before he spoke. It wasn't even 5 in the morning, but I didn't stop him. The glass trembled in his hand as he lifted it to his lips. Not from withdrawal. No, this was something else. Fear. Memory. I didn't steal from the trust, he began. Not the way they said I did. I stayed silent. Let him talk. It was your uncle, he said. He was funneling money from one of the accounts, one nobody checked because it was in your name. My head snapped up. In my name? Yeah. A holding account your grandfather set up when you were a kid. Said it was for your future, college, investments, whatever. But when I found out it was empty, I panicked. I thought if I confronted your grandfather, he'd listen. That he'd believe me. But he didn't. My father nodded. No. He said I was trying to cover my own ass. That I was blaming family to protect myself. So you ran. He laughed bitterly. No, Michael. He made me disappear. I frowned. What does that mean? I was forced out. Blacklisted. Paid off to keep quiet. Said if I ever came back or made noise, he'd ruin me. And worse, he'd ruin you. Said you'd lose everything. That was his real threat. The room seemed to shrink. You could have told me, I said, my voice sharper than I meant it to be. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But every time I picked up the phone, I imagined you getting pulled into the storm I barely escaped. He looked at me, eyes rimmed red. And then when you disappeared from the family too, I thought maybe you'd figured it out. Maybe you were getting free. I leaned back in the chair, heart pounding. My whole life I'd blamed this man. Thought he'd abandoned us. Walked away. Let me take the fall. But he was protecting me from a man we both loved, feared, and couldn't seem to outrun. I don't know what to do with this, I whispered. He nodded slowly. Neither do I. But your grandfather does. Or he did. He slid something across the table. A sealed envelope. My name on the front. Handwriting unmistakable. I picked it up, pulse roaring in my ears. This was the next step. The final piece, maybe. Or the most dangerous one yet. I didn't open the envelope right away. It sat in my lap as I drove away from the house, from my father, from the version of my childhood I had just watched unravel. Sunlight began to crack through the trees as I pulled over at a rest stop. I parked in the shade, turned off the engine, and stared at my name scrawled across the envelope. Michael. Not Mike. Not son. Just Michael. It felt like a final verdict. I broke the seal. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Yellowed, brittle at the edges, but unmistakably written in my grandfather's hand. It wasn't a letter. It was a confession. I built a kingdom on silence, it began. And for that, I'm sorry. My chest tightened. He went on, describing how he had learned about the embezzlement years ago, how he knew it was my uncle, but buried it to protect the family name. How, when my father uncovered it, he made a choice, to exile him and erase the scandal. Your father chose honesty, the letter read. I chose legacy. And then the part that broke me. You reminded me of him. Too much. That's why I pushed you away. You questioned. You saw too much. You wouldn't play the game. I sat there, heart pounding, hands shaking. The man who raised me, who taught me to be strong, loyal, relentless, had sacrificed 2 generations of men to keep the house of cards standing. The letter ended with an address. Back in my hometown. Your final inheritance is here. If you want it. If you still believe in truth more than comfort. No apology. Just a door, left half open. I folded the letter carefully, put it back in the envelope. Then I started the car and turned it toward home. Because after all of this, I needed to see what he left behind. I needed to know if there was anything worth salvaging from the ruins. I needed to know who I really was, outside of his shadow. And maybe, just maybe, what it meant to carry the Whitaker name on my own terms. I pulled into the driveway of my childhood home just after noon. The lawn was overgrown. The mailbox leaning like it had given up. The same cracked porch steps. The same creaky wind chime my mother used to curse when it got tangled. Only now, no one lived here. After my grandfather passed, the estate manager told me the property had been sealed. Locked down. No tours. No keys handed out. So when I saw the front door slightly ajar, my stomach flipped. I stepped inside, slow, cautious. The air was thick with disuse and memories I hadn't invited. Everything was untouched. Furniture still wrapped in plastic. The same coat rack. The same umbrella I broke when I was 9 still tucked in the corner. But there, on the hallway table, was a box. Unmarked. Wooden. Small enough to fit in my lap. I sat on the staircase and opened it. Inside were dozens of letters. Some to me. Most unopened. Postmarked over the years. From places I'd never known my grandfather had been. One from Istanbul. Another from Alaska. One, unbelievably, from a hospital in Cape Town. And beneath the letters, photos. Photos of me. My high school graduation. College. A blurry shot of me and Claire at a coffee shop we frequented years ago. He had been watching. Not in a creepy way. In a guilty one. He never reached out. Never spoke. But he kept records. Tracked my life like it was a news story he didn't have the right to influence. And then, at the bottom of the box, a key. Just a small brass key with a tag that said garage. I stood. Walked outside. The garage hadn't been opened in years. The padlock was rusted, but still functional. I slid the key in. It turned with a click that sounded like an exhale. Inside was a single object. A large safe bolted to the ground. The combination lock had 4 digits. I stared at it, heart pounding. Then I remembered something. The numbers on the back of the watch. 41, 3947/81, 6937. Coordinates, but also possible combinations. The last 4 digits. I tried 6937. Click. The door opened. Inside, documents. Thick files. A ledger. A flash drive. And a single photograph taped to the inside wall. My grandfather, my father, and me. All 3 of us. Smiling. And scrawled across the bottom in faded ink. Fix what I broke. I sank to the floor, staring into the vault, into the paper trail of a legacy built on silence, and the burden of unmaking it. This was it. The final truth. And it was mine to carry now. The ledger was old school, handwritten in ink that had begun to fade. Every page was a transaction. Names, dates, amounts. And scribbled next to many of them, initials I recognized. My uncle. My grandfather. My father. But some initials I didn't know. There were notations, small comments in the margins. Diversion to protect board position. Under the table transfer. Silent buyout. Fix before Michael sees. I felt sick. This wasn't just about family. This was about power. Corporate silence. A dynasty built on manipulation and self-preservation. The flash drive was even worse. I plugged it into my laptop back at the motel, hands trembling. It was full of audio files. Conversations. Some secret. Some obviously recorded without consent. One of them was of my grandfather yelling at my father. If you won't bury it, I will. Another, my uncle, bragging about cutting corners to secure contracts. And then one of me. I was 16. A holiday dinner. My voice was light, eager. I said something like, "Why don't we donate some of the company profits this year?" Laughter. Then my grandfather's voice. "You have a good heart, Michael. But that's not how legacy works." Click. I shut the laptop. My face burned. It was never about money. Not really. It was about control. About who got to tell the story. And now, I had the pen. Back home, I met with an attorney. Then a journalist. Then a second attorney. I didn't sleep for days. Claire called. I didn't answer. My mother left a voicemail. Heard I was back in town. Heard whispers. Asked if I was okay. I deleted the message. Because I wasn't okay. I was unraveling everything I thought made me who I was. But here's the thing about unraveling. It makes space for something new. 1 week later, I walked into the Whitaker family office. Marble floors. Oil paintings. Staff who pretended not to remember me. I walked straight to the boardroom and laid the ledger on the table. My uncle was there. He looked up like he'd seen a ghost. "Michael." I cut him off. "You buried my father to save yourself." He stood, face flushed. "You don't understand." "No," I said. "You don't. But you will." I handed copies of the documents to every board member. And then I walked out. Not because I was angry. Because I was done. The final inheritance wasn't the money. It was the truth. And I finally understood the real legacy I'd been left. Not silence, not shame, but the chance to break the cycle. And that was worth everything. The fallout was fast. Within 48 hours, headlines hit every local and regional outlet. Whitaker dynasty under investigation. Family empire built on hidden scandals. My uncle went dark. No statements, no denials. The board suspended him pending a full review. And me? I kept moving. I sold my condo. Cut ties with the law firm I once thought I'd retire from. Took only what I needed. The rest, I donated. Not for redemption. For clarity. For freedom. Claire found me 2 weeks later, sitting on a park bench by the river we used to walk beside. She didn't say anything right away. Just sat down beside me. You could have told me, she finally said. I didn't know how. She nodded. I'm not mad. Just wish you let me carry some of it. I looked at her. Really looked. And I saw something I hadn't seen in a long time. Trust. She slipped her hand into mine. So what now? I don't know, I said honestly. But I'm not scared of the question anymore. I returned to the garage once more before I left town. Not for closure. For grounding. I opened the safe, held the photo of the three of us, my grandfather, my father, and me. We all made mistakes. Some ran. Some ruled. Some resisted. But we all lived in the shadow of a name that had become too heavy. So I did something none of them ever could. I let it go. I buried the watch beneath the oak tree in the backyard. Marked the spot with a stone. Not to hide it. To remember. To forgive. Then I walked away. And for the first time in my life, I didn't look back. Because the test wasn't just to find the truth. It was to become someone new because of it. And I finally had. It's been 11 months since I walked away from the Whitaker name. I live on the coast now. Small town, population under 5,000. I rent a one-bedroom house a few blocks from the ocean. It's quiet. No legacy to protect. No expectations to meet. Just air. And space. And time. I teach part-time at the community college. History, mostly. Some ethics. The irony isn't lost on me. Sometimes students ask why I left corporate law. I tell them the truth. I stopped believing in the stories we told ourselves to sleep at night. I don't talk about the inheritance. Or the scandal. Or the watch buried under the oak. But I carry them with me. Not as shame. As reminders. Claire visits twice a month. Sometimes more. We're figuring things out. Not rewinding. Not rebuilding. Just becoming different people, separately, and maybe, someday, together again. And my father? We write letters. Actual pen and paper. Every few weeks. It's awkward. It's slow. But it's honest. He's thinking of moving closer. Starting over. I told him if he does, I'd help him paint the house. We both laughed at that. Some nights I sit on the porch and reread my grandfather's confession. Not out of anger, but to remember how far we all fell. And how far we've climbed back. Legacy isn't what we inherit. It's what we choose to break. And maybe, just maybe, it's what we choose to build afterward. That's what this was always about. Not forgiveness. Not revenge. But freedom. And finally, after everything, I'm free.